The silent warning. The holographic star map flickered in the center of the Galactic Defense Council chamber, casting blue light across the assembled faces of 12 species' most decorated military commanders. Admiral Sarah Chen sat at the far end of the crescent-shaped table, her hands folded quietly in her lap, watching as alien after alien voiced their opinions with growing confidence. "The Zephyrian advance is predictable," announced General Vortax of the Krelian Empire, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically at the projection. His scaled skin gleamed under the artificial light as he pointed to the enemy fleet formations. "They move in standard wedge patterns. We crush them at the Nexus Gate with overwhelming force." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Admiral Chen shifted slightly in her chair, her brown eyes tracking the tactical display with quiet intensity. She had studied the Zephyrian military doctrine for 3 years, poring over every engagement, every defeat they had handed to overconfident civilizations. What she saw in that hologram made her stomach clench with dread. "Their formations appear standard," Chen said, her voice calm and measured. The conversation died as 12 pairs of alien eyes turned toward her. "But if you examine the spacing between their ships and the energy signatures from their latest engagements, there's something different about this advance." Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony Alliance leaned back in his floating chair, his tentacles writhing with what Chen had learned was amusement among his species. "Admiral Chen, your concern is noted. However, the Zephyrians have used these tactics for 2 centuries. They are creatures of habit, not innovation." "With respect, Commander," Chen continued, standing slowly and moving toward the hologram. "Their habit has been winning. Every fleet that underestimated them based on previous patterns has been destroyed. The Battle of Kepler Station, the massacre at Rigel 7, the complete annihilation of the Centauri Defense Fleet." She paused, letting the weight of those defeats settle over the room. All followed the same pattern of overconfidence. General Vortax's scales darkened, a sign of irritation. "Those were inferior civilizations with outdated technology. The combined might of our alliance far exceeds anything the Zephyrians have faced." Chen activated her personal data pad, and new information began overlaying the main display. Energy readings, ship movement patterns, communication intercepts. "Look at these readings from their scout ships. The power signatures don't match their standard vessels. They've upgraded their technology significantly, and their formation spacing suggests they're using some kind of networked combat system." The room fell silent for a moment as the commanders studied the data. Then Fleet Admiral Jorix of the Stellar Confederation spoke, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for longer than humans had been spacefaring. "Admiral Chen, your species has been part of this alliance for only 15 years. We have been fighting the Zephyrian threat for over 3 centuries. Perhaps it would be wise to defer to those with more experience." Heat flashed behind Chen's eyes, but her expression remained perfectly controlled. She had heard variations of this dismissal countless times since joining the alliance. The young species, the newcomers, the ones who didn't understand the complexities of galactic warfare. "Experience is valuable," she replied evenly. "But so is fresh perspective. The Zephyrians have adapted their tactics because they've been studying us for 3 centuries too. They know how we think, how we fight, how we dismiss threats that don't fit our established patterns." "Enough," General Vortax declared, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "The strategy is sound. We will deploy our fleets in a coordinated assault at the Nexus Gate. Their forces will be crushed between our anvil and hammer formations. The matter is settled." One by one, the alien commanders voiced their agreement. The Hegemony would provide the heavy assault ships. The Confederation would handle long-range bombardment. The Krelian Empire would lead the frontal assault. Each species claimed their role in what they saw as inevitable victory. Chen remained standing by the hologram, studying the Zephyrian formations with growing unease. She traced their projected paths with her finger, running probability calculations in her head. The more she analyzed their positioning, the more certain she became that this was a trap. "I request permission to position human forces as a reserve fleet," she said, interrupting the tactical assignments. The room turned toward her again, and she could feel the weight of their collective impatience. Reserve forces. Commander Zethkar's tentacles curled with what Chen recognized as condescension. "Admiral, this will be a decisive victory. Reserve forces will not be necessary." "If I'm wrong, the reserves won't be needed," Chen replied. "If I'm right, they'll be the difference between victory and extinction." Fleet Admiral Jorix consulted his tactical display, then looked back at Chen with something approaching pity. "Very well. Human forces will remain in reserve position at the outer marker. Try not to feel left out when the battle is won without you." The meeting concluded with final preparations and ceremonial declarations of coming victory. One by one, the alien commanders filed out of the chamber, their voices echoing with confidence and anticipation. Chen remained behind, staring at the holographic display long after the others had gone. She activated her secure communication channel, and the weathered face of Captain Marcus Webb appeared in the smaller display window. His gray eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had survived more impossible battles than most people could imagine. "How bad is it?" Webb asked without preamble. "Worse than they think," Chen replied. "They're walking into a massacre, and they won't listen to warnings from the junior species." Webb nodded grimly. "Orders." Chen studied the tactical display one more time, then began highlighting positions on the star map. "Pull back all human vessels to defensive positions around the civilian evacuation routes. Prepare for full combat deployment, but keep us dark until the shooting starts." "And Marcus?" She paused, meeting his eyes through the communication link. "Prep the Prometheus Protocol." Webb's expression grew serious. The Prometheus Protocol was humanity's most closely guarded military secret, a tactical doctrine developed from studying every major fleet engagement in galactic history. It was designed for exactly this scenario, when overwhelming arrogance met superior enemy preparation. "Are you sure?" Webb asked. "They're going to need us," Chen said quietly. "And when they do, we'll be ready." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation and growing tension. Chen watched from the bridge of her flagship, the UES Defiance, as the Allied fleets took their positions. Thousands of ships from a dozen species, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint, and their crews confident in their technological superiority. The Zephyrian fleet appeared exactly on schedule, emerging from hyperspace in the predicted formations. To the alien commanders, everything appeared to be going according to plan. The enemy was outnumbered 3-1, their ships arranged in the expected wedge formation, their approach vector exactly as predicted. Chen watched the tactical display with growing dread as the first phase of the battle began. The Confederation's long-range bombardment opened the engagement, their massive energy weapons reaching across space to hammer the Zephyrian forward positions. Direct hits scored against enemy shields, and cheers erupted across the Allied communication channels. Then the Zephyrian formation began to shift. What had appeared to be a standard wedge attack suddenly revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. The enemy ships didn't scatter or retreat as expected. Instead, they began moving in perfect coordination, their formation flowing like liquid mercury around the Allied assault. "What are they doing?" General Vortax's voice crackled over the communication channel, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. Chen watched as the Zephyrian ships revealed their true capability. The spacing she had identified wasn't random. It was precisely calculated to create overlapping fields of fire and mutual protection. As the Allied fleets committed to their assault, the Zephyrian formation enveloped them like a closing fist. The massacre began within minutes. The Krellian Empire's frontal assault ships found themselves trapped in a killing field, their heavy armor useless against coordinated fire from multiple angles. The Confederation's bombardment vessels, designed for long-range engagement, were suddenly facing close-quarters combat from enemy ships that had somehow appeared behind their lines. "This is impossible." Fleet Admiral Jorix's voice carried panic for the first time in his long career. "Their ships can't move that fast." But they could, and they were. The Zephyrians had done more than upgrade their technology. They had revolutionized their entire tactical doctrine. Their networked combat system allowed them to fight as a single organism, each ship perfectly coordinated with every other. Chen watched the slaughter unfold with sick certainty. This was exactly what she had feared, exactly what she had tried to warn them about. The Allied fleets were being dismantled piece by piece, their superior numbers meaningless against an enemy that fought with perfect coordination and tactical brilliance. "Admiral," Captain Webb's voice cut through her grim observations. "Multiple distress signals from the Allied fleets. They're requesting immediate assistance." Chen studied the tactical display one more time. The Allied forces were scattered, disorganized, and being systematically destroyed. But there were patterns in the Zephyrian assault, weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who understood what they were really facing. "Signal all human vessels," she said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had prepared for this exact moment. "Execute Prometheus Protocol. We're going in." When silence becomes thunder, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm breaking over a calm sea. Where the alien commanders had deployed their forces in massive, predictable formations, Admiral Chen's ships materialized in scattered groups, each positioned to exploit the tactical gaps she had identified in the Zephyrian assault pattern. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen." Her voice carried across the human fleet communication channels with steady authority. "Remember your training. We're not here to match their strength. We're here to break their rhythm." The UES Defiance led the assault, its sleek hull cutting through space toward the heart of the Zephyrian formation. Behind it, 57 human vessels moved with purpose, each captain understanding their role in a plan that had been refined through years of careful study and preparation. Commander Zethkar's panicked voice crackled over the Allied communication channel. "Admiral Chen, where have you been? We need immediate reinforcement at Grid 77 Alpha." "Negative, Commander," Chen replied, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Grid 77 Alpha is a trap. They want you to send reinforcements there so they can encircle and destroy them. Pull your remaining ships back to defensive positions and let us work. You cannot give orders to Allied forces." General Vortax's voice carried rage and desperation in equal measure. His own fleet had been reduced to less than 30% operational capacity. The chain of command. "The chain of command is broken," Chen interrupted. "Half your flagships are debris, and the other half are about to join them. Either trust us to do what we were trained for, or watch the rest of your fleets die." The silence that followed spoke volumes. The proud alien commanders, who had dismissed human tactical capabilities just hours earlier, were faced with the stark reality of their situation. Their superior technology and centuries of experience meant nothing against an enemy that had outvolved their understanding of warfare. Captain Webb's voice cut through the tension. "Admiral, First Wave is in position. Zephyrian formation is responding to our presence." Chen smiled grimly as she watched the enemy formation begin to shift. The Zephyrians were adapting to the new threat, but their adaptation revealed the weakness she had been looking for. Their networked combat system was incredibly powerful when fighting predictable opponents, but it required time to analyze and respond to truly innovative tactics. "All ships, execute Pattern Omega," she commanded. The human fleet suddenly scattered in what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships broke formation and began moving in seemingly random directions, some accelerating directly toward the enemy, others appearing to retreat, still others moving in complex spirals that made no tactical sense to conventional military doctrine. But there was method in the madness. Each human captain had spent years studying the battle recordings of every major fleet engagement in galactic history. They had identified the patterns that species fell into under stress, the predictable responses that allowed enemies to anticipate and counter their moves. The Zephyrian formation, designed to respond to coordinated assaults, found itself facing something entirely different. Where they expected disciplined formations, they encountered apparent chaos. Where they anticipated predictable maneuvers, They faced actions that seemed to follow no tactical doctrine they had ever encountered. What are they doing? Fleet Admiral Jorix's voice carried confusion as he watched the human ships through his sensors. They're fighting like madmen. Chen's response carried a note of fierce satisfaction. We're fighting like humans. The first Zephyrian ships began to fall as the human assault found its rhythm. Captain Maria Santos in the UES Retribution used her ship's superior maneuverability to dance between enemy fire, her weapons targeting the communication nodes that linked the Zephyrian network. Captain David Kim in the UES Vengeance coordinated with 3 other vessels to create a moving pocket of overlapping fire that punched through the enemy formation like a spear. But it was the overall pattern that began to tell the story. The human fleet wasn't trying to match the Zephyrian coordination. They were disrupting it. Each attack was designed to force the enemy network to recalculate, to adapt, to shift focus. And with each forced adaptation, the network became slightly less efficient, slightly more predictable. Admiral Chen. Commander Zethkar's voice carried something Chen had never heard from him before: respect. Our sensors are detecting massive disruption in the Zephyrian formation. How are you doing this? We studied them, Chen replied simply, as the UES Defiance rolled through a complex maneuver that brought its main guns to bear on a cluster of enemy vessels. We studied everyone. Every battle, every defeat, every tactical innovation in galactic military history. We learned what worked, what failed, and why. The tide of battle began to shift as more human vessels joined the assault. Each ship fought with brutal efficiency, their captains adapting in real time to the changing tactical situation. Where the Zephyrian network tried to predict and counter their moves, the humans simply changed tactics entirely. Captain Elena Rodriguez in the UES Thunderbolt demonstrated the principle perfectly. When enemy ships moved to encircle her vessel, she didn't try to break free or call for reinforcement. Instead, she accelerated directly into the encirclement, her ship's weapons blazing as she carved through the enemy formation from the inside out. Impossible, General Vortax whispered, watching the tactical display as the human assault continued to gain momentum. No ship can survive that kind of assault. Human ships can, Chen replied, because human crews don't fight like anyone else. The truth was more complex than that, but Chen wasn't about to share all of humanity's tactical secrets with the allies who had dismissed them so completely. Human military doctrine was built on adaptability, on the assumption that any battle plan would fall apart within minutes of first contact with the enemy. Where other species trained their crews to follow precise tactical doctrines, humans trained theirs to improvise, to adapt, to find solutions that no military academy had ever taught. The Zephyrian formation began to collapse as their networked coordination system finally reached its breaking point. The constant adaptation required to counter human tactics had overloaded their ability to maintain fleet-wide coordination. Individual ships began fighting independently, and that was exactly where the humans wanted them. All Allied vessels. Chen broadcast on the General Communication Channel. Enemy coordination is breaking down. Now is the time to press the attack, but do it smart. Don't charge in like you did before. Follow human tactical lead and hit them where they're weak. The surviving alien ships, their crews having witnessed the devastating effectiveness of human tactics, began to coordinate with the human fleet. It was a humbling experience for commanders who had dismissed human military capability, but pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. The battle's conclusion came with surprising speed. Once their coordination network collapsed, the Zephyrian fleet found itself facing not just human tactical innovation, but the combined firepower of species that had finally learned to fight as a unified force rather than a collection of individual evos. As the last enemy ship disappeared in a flash of expelled atmosphere and twisted metal, silence fell over the communication channels. The magnitude of what had just occurred was slowly sinking in for the alien commanders who had survived. Fleet Admiral Jorix was the first to break the silence. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Stellar Confederation, I offer our formal apology and our profound gratitude. Your tactical brilliance saved not just our fleets, but our civilizations. Similar messages began flooding in from the other surviving commanders. General Vortex, his voice subdued by the magnitude of his earlier errors, requested permission to study human tactical doctrines. Commander Zethkar formally recommended Chen for supreme command of all Allied military forces. Chen listened to the praise and requests with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the crisis. When the communication channels finally quieted, she activated a fleet-wide broadcast. Today's victory belongs to every crew member who chose adaptation over rigid doctrine, who chose to listen rather than assume, who chose humility over arrogance. The Zephyrians were defeated not because we were stronger, but because we were willing to learn. She paused, looking out at the debris field that had once been an enemy fleet, and the scattered formations of Allied ships that had survived because they had finally learned to work together. Military superiority isn't measured in the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. It's measured in your ability to understand your enemy, to adapt to changing circumstances, and to coordinate with allies who might think differently than you do. The weeks that followed saw a complete restructuring of galactic military doctrine. Human tactical innovations were studied and adopted across the Alliance. Joint training exercises became the norm rather than the exception. Most importantly, the tradition of dismissing input from junior species was formally abolished. Admiral Chen found herself appointed as Supreme Allied Commander, a position that had never existed before, but became necessary as the various species learned to integrate their military capabilities. She accepted the role with characteristic quiet dignity, and her first order was to establish the Galactic Tactical Institute, where officers from all species would learn to fight as a unified force. The Zephyrian threat had been neutralized, but the real victory was the transformation of the Galactic Alliance from a collection of competing egos into a truly unified military force. And it had all started with one quiet human who refused to be ignored when lives were at stake. In her final report on the engagement, Chen wrote, "The greatest weapon in any commander's arsenal is not technology or numbers. It's the wisdom to listen to voices that speak uncomfortable truths. Today, we learned that lesson at the cost of thousands of lives. Tomorrow, we must ensure we never forget it." The galaxy had learned to listen to the quiet human, and in that listening, they had found not just military victory, but the foundation for a truly united future among the stars.